Good evening. This is Mayor Harmon. I'd like to call this meeting to order and state that all council members are present via teleconferencing. Councilmember Marks, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Thank you. Yes, I would. See if we have a slide of the flag.
Just 1 second here. Let me
Okay.
get that up for you.
Thank you. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And City Attorney, would you like to report out in closed session?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The council did meet in closed session on 2 matters. One, conference with labor negotiators with the group represented and unrepresented employee organizations listed on the agenda. There was no reportable action coming out of that item. And also a conference with real property negotiators related to the acquisition of 2 sewer line easements. The staff received negotiating parameters from the council by unanimous consent, and no further reportable action was taken on that item. That concludes the report, Madam Mayor.
Thank you for that. City Manager, would you please present your report?
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Brief city manager report tonight. I wanted to give the council and the community an update on our buy local bonus program. We've had over 140 businesses participate, about 2,500 shoppers that has resulted in about $500,000 in local spending related to the program. And then the city does plan to bring the program back for the holiday season this winter. That, of course, will be subject to your budget deliberations as part of the financial plan. You may have read with some interest in the Tribune. We're seeing that at community development. We're seeing requests for tenant improvement applications and for re-tenanting some of these businesses as business confidence. And so we're excited to see that perhaps some of these empty storefronts will be filled. We have launched, and I put up on the slide, some of our new messaging, Together We Can messaging, and it has various different ending taglines. Here's an example, see this through. If you're interested in putting one of these at your house or your place of business, come by City Hall. We've got signs downtown. We want to encourage a really positive spirit throughout the city of San Luis Obispo. We've gone through so much in the last year, and we're just really appealing to the community in general to kind of stick it through to the end and hold true to some of the things that have gotten us to this point. And you'll see some stickers, you'll see electronic files that have been shared. And so we're really trying to make sure that people are hopeful as we make it through the final stages of this pandemic. We're also promoting the National Mayor's Challenge for Water Conservation that began on April 1st. And it is certainly timely given where we are with our rainfall this year. We'll be having some more in-depth discussions as part of our urban water management plan in next week on April 13th. And we're happy to highlight this program and many other programs that we and to take and or could be taking should we find ourselves in the need to implement conservation measures. I hope everyone's had a chance to go down to Mission Plaza. We see our first plaza pop-up through the flowers, and it's created in partnership with the SLO Museum of Art. And it's up now through the month of April, and it's to complement our Mayflowers program in partnership with downtown San Luis Obispo. This is just really exciting for us. We've seen some really new energy over at the SLO Museum of Art, and you'll see in the budget proposal will be coming to the council on April 20th that we'll really starting to dig into the major city goals. And if you recall, the council approved a master plan for public art a few years ago. And one of the key themes is creating these partnerships with are the arts community, and we're really excited about this partnership with the SLO Museum of Art. You may have also seen some work that's being done on some of our roadways in advance of the scheduled slurry seals. We had some areas that were failing on Upper Monterey, and our teams got out there. City teams went out and did some patching up on Monterey Street, all the way from about California, all the way down to Santa Rosa Street on Monterey. Really kind of the lines of travel where a few potholes were springing up, and they did a fantastic job reaching out to business owners and putting that roadway back in a serviceable condition until we have the time to do a full rework of that surface way that's scheduled in the 24-25 fiscal plan. And then last but not least, the South Hills Open Space Boardwalk is open for use. There's been some work out there by our Rangers team to make sure that our hiking trails are not impacting some of our seasonal wet areas. And that was an area that we got feedback from hikers and from residents where we could improve the quality of the experience for hikers, and at the same time do a better job preserving the environment. If you excuse me for 1 second, we got the team in here. They're doing some vacuuming, so I'm just going to close my door real quick before I jump back in, so I don't get too distracted. Sorry about that. So if there's no questions about the city manager's report, then I'll jump down into the emergency services director update. All right, seeing none, the recommendation tonight is to receive an update from the emergency service director related to COVID-19. We always start out with the cases, and we're just over 20,500 cases, California cases over 3.5 million, United States over 30 million, and worldwide cases over 130 million. Today's case rate, 43. The active cases still very low at 231. The bulk of the cases in San Luis Obispo County have recovered, and we still unfortunately have deaths that are over 250. It's important as you look at this graph just to look at the 14-day trend. It has trended downward, though it has flattened out. The latest models that we're looking at continue to see that slow flattening out. There was some concern about some of the variants and concern about the rate and uptake of vaccinations. That is something that we continue to emphasize, but nevertheless, the models are not showing at this time that conditions are going to get worse, but that doesn't mean we can let up. We are, if you heard Dr. Fauci talk today, and you saw the notes from Governor Newsom's press conference, still recommending mass social distancing, et cetera, until such time as the pandemic actually comes to an end. Where are we in terms of our SLO County Hospital ICU data? 66% of the beds are available. The total ICU beds are 38. 13 are occupied in our county, 0 with COVID. If you look up here in the upper right-hand corner, residents with COVID-19 in hospital, the total is 8, 1 in ICU, and that's confusing between the two, and that's because one of the individuals from our county is out of county hospital down at the Marion Regional Medical Center. Looking at the state's reopening criteria, we are seeing a higher case rate than we've seen in the last few weeks, 6.3. We're still not there to go into the orange tier. Our unadjusted case rate is at 8.1. Positivity rate is good. We have 2.3%. and our 2.8% in our Healthy Places Index, and our testing remains pretty high. You're seeing more and more of the 58 counties working themselves through the tier, and you probably saw the promising, encouraging note today that if everything continues on the trends of where we are today, we could see the roadmap the state's reopening criteria and roadmap set aside and see a full reopening on June 15th. But that's subject to a lot of variables and us continue to make the progress that we've made really on the vaccination side. We still need to cross some of the hurdles of getting the overall general population vaccinated and not have any additional uptick in cases. So who is being vaccinated now? This is a lot of progress, I think, since the last time that I briefed the city council. SLO County residents age 30 and older, and we're still, of course, vaccinating everyone in phase 1A and in 1B. And so you can work through those categories that are up here on the screen. The SLO County residents age 16 plus, we think that that may happen within the June timeframe. It all depends on see how quick the supply is impacted by opening up to the SLO County residents 30 or older. The total number of vaccines sent to SLO County Public Health is over 100,000, with over 100,000 doses administered. You may have seen last week in the Tribune the cover story of the woman who was the 100,000th person in our county to receive the vaccination. In terms statewide, what are we seeing? Statewide, the dose at 77.6%, 20 million doses administered, 360,000 average doses per day. Those individuals that are partially vaccinated, 18.5%, over closing 6 million, 7.5 million people fully vaccinated. The doses on hand, 2.5 million. And I'll go probably just move over here to the left-hand side. The total doses administered by the county of residents. This county of San Luis Obispo continues to do a really good job with 150,000 doses administered in San Luis Obispo County. And just to cover and to recap some of the highlights from today's governor's press conference, he announced a plan to fully reopen the economy on June 15th. If the current trends hold, the entire state will enter into this phase at the same time, meaning there won't be pockets of the state that stay in different phases, and the California will end the state's blueprint for reopening after June 15th. But it's likely we'll continue to wear masks and we'll still be administering vaccines at the state's current pace. And there was a question that was asked to the governor and asked in other media channels today, and the recommendation is continued to be that mask wearing, continue vigilance of the virus, social distancing, and hygiene will still be in order. I will share with you in my city manager's call last week that we're talking about what are the next strategies to hit those hard to vaccinate populations in our community. And so one of the strategies that's being evaluated is potential mobile vaccinations, and that like was successfully done to some of the farm worker community. And so I know the county is evaluating that strategy. You'll see a big push of information in the upcoming weeks as we try to work on continuing to encourage to vaccinate individuals. I would suggest to the council that once the full council, and I think most of your leadership team has gotten vaccinations, one of the most powerful things that we can do is use our social media channels and use our newsletters and use our emails and talk about our experience. People love to see leadership leading the way, getting our vaccinations and demonstrating in the community that it's safe and it's the right thing to do for the community and the people that they love. And with that, Madam Mayor and Council, that concludes my report, and happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you share a little bit about how we are working with Cal Poly or Cuesta regarding the 16 plus age group and getting vaccinated?
I would love to give you information. I don't have any information of what we're doing right now. I think that's probably downstream, but I think if there's ideas or recommendations that you have, we'd love to hear. Right now, I think the focus is on those hard to vaccinate communities. There was some good data in last week's Tribune that was taken from County Public Health about how much of each demographic cohort was remaining to be vaccinated. And so there's still some work to get people who were hesitant and concerned and to move them over to actually converting to getting their vaccinations. One of the areas that I think the county is encountering is just, I think, some technical frustration with the website through public health. And so that is seen as a barrier. So I think we're exploring lots of different strategies with them, but certainly when we start to open up from that 16 to 30, there'll be, I think, some clear messaging of what we can do to get young people to get vaccinated. Clearly, that's of concern, as we understand, at least in reading the news, that the latest variant is seemingly concentrating into that younger demographic. And so we want to make sure that no cohort of the community feels as if they're immune and doesn't need to get the vaccination.
So I have a kind of a follow-up question to Councilmember Stewart. Are we communicating with Cal Poly at all about young people? And I guess I'm really concerned that our city is having the most cases of COVID, and it's my understanding that that has to do with the younger people who are coming down with it. So what are we doing in that regard?
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Marks, we made a fair amount of contacts this last weekend. We issued a number of citations. One of the calls that I need to reach out to is to Cal Poly to see what we are doing to make sure that students continue to understand that we are still in a pandemic and that the rules apply to the entire community. And there are limitations and restrictions on gatherings. We continue to refer individuals to the Office of Student Life, and so that when we have interactions with students that result in citations, but I'll be having some further conversations with Cal Poly administration to see what we can be actively doing to discourage social behaviors that perhaps are spreading the disease.
Anybody else? No. Okay, then before we move on with our agenda, I just wanted to take a moment to make it clear that the City of San Luis Obispo stands in full support of all people, including Asian American and Pacific Islanders, and that we are a welcoming city. And in our welcoming city resolution, we clearly state that the City Council proclaimed that the City of San Luis Obispo will not tolerate racial bias and welcomes warmly and without reservation neighbors of all races and ethnicities into our community. And the City Council is committed to San Luis Obispo being a welcoming and inclusive community for everyone. And while we promote free thought and speech, we condemn racism and brutality, hate speech, bigotry, violence, and prejudice in any form. And I would also encourage all of us to make an effort to support our Asian-owned businesses here in our community and to reach out to those that are feeling under threat at this time. And additionally, I just want to name that we have had to have our flags flown at half-staff seemingly endlessly, and almost feels like we should just leave them at half-staff forever. And so we all need to be working harder to address all types of violence, but in particular gun violence in this country, and especially gun violence against the most vulnerable in our community. And with that, I would like to, it is an honor to present a proclamation to honor Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so Stacy Salome, on behalf of RISE, will receive this proclamation. Whereas Sexual Assault Month calls attention to the fact that sexual violence is widespread and impacts every person in San Luis Obispo, and whereas rape, sexual assault, and sexual harassment harm our community, and statistics show that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men will be raped at some point in their lives. And whereas child sexual abuse prevention must be a priority to confront the reality that 1 in 6 boys and 1 in 4 girls will experience a sexual assault before the age of 18, and youth ages 12 to 17 are 2.5 times as likely to be victims of sexual violence. And whereas our local student population is also at high risk, nationally, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 16 men are sexually assaulted during their time in college. And whereas last year, RISE received 1,691 crisis calls from members of our community and provided 4,832 days of emergency shelter. And whereas the number of RISE clients seeking counseling for sexual assault related issues continues to increase every year, with a total of 2,334 hours of counseling provided at low or no cost to community members across the county last year. And whereas last year RISE reached 2,699 people by prevention education programming and trained 28 volunteers to serve as advocates on the RISE crisis line. And whereas the city of San Luis Obispo joins RISE and other advocates and communities across the country in taking action to prevent sexual violence, and acknowledges that each day of the year is an opportunity to create change for the future. Now, therefore, I, Heidi Harmon, a survivor of sexual violence, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I believe that we have Stacy here. Yes, okay.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Harmon and City Council for this proclamation. My name is Stacy Salome. I'm the Director of Marketing and Development for RISE. I use she, her pronouns. RISE is a nonprofit that serves survivors of sexual and intimate partner violence and their loved ones. And we provide intimate partner violence services in North County. We are the only agency dedicated to serving survivors of sexual assault or abuse and their families in the entire county of San Luis Obispo. Sexual Assault Awareness Month calls attention to the 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men who will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. For those in the LGBTQ+ community, those numbers are even higher. RISE has remained committed to continuing to provide essential crisis interventions and services to survivors in the midst of COVID-19. So in order to make our therapy services available to survivors and their families, RISE put in place infrastructure to allow us to offer telehealth virtual therapy for both individuals and groups. And this capacity will expand our capacity for serving clients beyond the pandemic. Our 2 emergency shelters remain open to survivors fleeing violence, and we adjusted the protocols to ensure a safe and healthy environment for our guests and for staff. Our advocates continue to be available 24/7 on our crisis line, and our educators continue to provide prevention services across the county. RISE increased the amount of financial support we provided to clients from $5,000 in 2019 to over $20,000 in 2020, so 4 times more year over year. And we were able to meet this incredible need due in large part to the CARES Act. And although we're hopeful for the continued easing of restrictions, the impact of the pandemic continues to place an extraordinary burden on our clients today. And our return to normal doesn't solve for those clients, for those who normal never included safety. And so now more than ever, survivors need the support of their local community. So although RISE invites all of SLO County to believe survivors this Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So if you visit riseslo.org, you can take an I Believe pledge and make a commitment to supporting survivors in your life. And while you're there, you can read about why this pledge is so critical. And you can also make a donation to support ongoing services. And participate in 10 days of winning starting April 19th. We'll be giving away some awesome prizes on Facebook for those who take the pledge and have made a donation. We also invite you to participate in a free 1-hour lunch and learn workshop, which will cover how sexual assault is represented in popular culture media, myths and misconceptions, and give tools for how you can make a difference in our community. The workshop will be hosted via Zoom on April 22nd at noon, and more information can also be found on our website about that event. Finally, if you or anyone you know is experiencing sexual or intimate partner violence and needs help, please call us at 855-886-7473 to speak to one of our confidential advocates. We're so grateful for the support of our community now more than ever.
Thank you so much for the great and essential work that you do. And thank you to my colleagues for wearing teal tonight in support. Yes, thank you. And now I'd like to present a proclamation declaring the month of April as Month of the Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month to Melinda Sokolowski of CAPSLO. Whereas the San Luis Obispo City Council recognizes that every moment in a child's life is an opportunity for that child to learn, and that quality of these experiences may determine whether a child succeeds in school and in life, and that all children need caring and loving adults in their lives. And whereas April, Month of the Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month, marks a time to recognize that our community's children are precious assets, and the quality of their early years is our collective responsibility, and that we commit ourselves to ensuring that each and every child has access to high quality early environment and home and at childcare, at school and in the community, and that will promote their optimal growth and development. And whereas in solidarity of the We Are the Care initiative, as a community of partners and leaders envision a San Luis Obispo County where all families can find and afford quality care for their children, and where child care professionals are valued for their critical role in building a solid foundation for children and families to thrive in the world. And whereas a variety of virtual and safe outdoor activities hosted by sanluischildcare.org honoring Month of the Child will provide an opportunity to acknowledge the dedication of individuals and organizations improving and enriching the lives of children and youth in our county, and raise the awareness of the community, employers, and elected officials of the need to improve the quality, availability, affordability, and accessibility of programs and of programs supporting children. And whereas Friday, April 2nd, 2021 commemorates the We Wear Blue for Kids Day, raising awareness for Child Abuse Prevention Month and recognizing that each of us has a role to play in ensuring the safety of our children as we pledge our support for strategies that strengthen families and protect our young ones. And whereas in this caring and connected county, we will, including and beyond the Month of the Child, continue to dedicate our efforts and our resources to investing in our community's future by investing in and supporting some of the most vulnerable amongst us, our community's children and youth. Now, therefore, I, Heidi Harmon, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Month of the Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month.
Hi, I'm Melinda Sokolowski, representing the First Five Commission and the San Luis Obispo Child Care Planning Council. Thank you, Mayor Harmon and City Council. Happy Month of the Child. I have a friend with me here today. Do you want to say hello?
Hi, my name is McCoy. I'm 5.
So thank you for this opportunity to celebrate our community and the 54,000 children and their families. They live, grow, play, and learn among our county every day. April is Month of the Child and Child Abuse Prevention Month. We hope that you will join us and kids of all ages at one of the many events during the month. We usually host an annual Children's Day in the Plaza in downtown SLO. However, in an effort to keep our children, families, and communities safe, we are shifting to a month-long celebration of virtual activities every day in April. We will be showcasing some of our amazing community resources, programs, and activities. We encourage you to check out our website at www.sanluischildcare.org or follow us on social media, and we will be doing a spotlight every day of activities. We also invite you to join the charge in advocating for our littlest learners by supporting and participating in We Are the Care initiative, where we are looking at new ways to engage local government, the childcare workforce, and build bridges with the business community. We know now more than ever, children and families need our support and attention. And we know that sustaining childcare as the backbone of economic vitality is essential. April is only one of 12 months, and we're proud to honor our local hands-on heroes throughout the year. These heroes play a critical role in the lives of children and families. I encourage all of us to keep children in our county in our hearts, minds, and commitments every day, every year. It is our collective responsibility to demonstrate daily that our youth are our highest priority, as evidenced by our collective commitment of time, money, sustained effort, and unified support. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to another great year creating a connected community where children are our highest priority. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi. I hope you have a good day.
Great, everybody. All right, now we're going to move on to the introduction of Marky Jorgensen, the new assistant city attorney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is truly my pleasure to be able to introduce Marky. It is hard to believe that she has been with us almost a year now, and as a brave soul came in last May, just in the thick of COVID, hit the ground running, and has proven herself every day since to be a really extraordinary asset to the office, the organization, and the community. Marky is a Cal Poly grad, so a little bit of a homecoming for her to come back. She's a UC Davis School of Law graduate, where she graduated with honors, as best I can tell, in everything that she touched. She then went to a large private international law firm, Cooley, after graduating law school, and developed a great deal of litigation expertise there, and then moved to a mid-size employment law firm where she was able to take on a significant caseload very early in her career, and also prove herself to be an asset to that firm, which was certainly sad to lose her, but we are grateful for their loss. Marky's fiance, Daniel, and his family, the Kirstens, are SLO County natives. He is an entrepreneur and small business owner here in the city. And Marky and Daniel are lucky enough to find a wonderful home in Morro Bay and are now permanent homeowning residents of our county. As I said, she's been just an extraordinary addition to our office. I'm really grateful to have her. I think the city should be very grateful to have her, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce her finally in public to you all tonight.
Thank you, Christine. Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Thanks, Christine, for the really kind words. I'm so thrilled to be back with the city. I had the opportunity to intern as a law student and learn from Christine and admire her and want to be her when I grew up. So here I am continuing that pursuit, and I'm just so thrilled and honored to be able to serve the community and this wonderful council and all of our staff. And I've had the chance to email and have calls with a few of you, but I look forward to continuing to work with you and hopefully getting to meet you safely in person sometime soon. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Marky. Welcome to the family team. And now I'd like to ask Assistant City Manager Shelley Stanwyck to please introduce Rebecca Burnsoff, Business Manager for Community Services.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. It is such a pleasure to restart a San Luis tradition, and that is, of course, of hiring and introducing incredibly talented and capable employees to our council and our community. And as you can see this evening, they have very, very bright futures ahead of them. So please welcome Rebecca Bernstorff to the city of San Luis Obispo. She joined us about 2 months ago. From the Los Angeles area, specifically the city of Santa Clarita, where she was born and raised. And she received her bachelor's degree and her master's degree in public administration from Cal State University, Northridge. And not only was she born and raised in Santa Clarita, but she actually started her local government career there. And she was a management analyst in Santa Clarita. Staff rotate departments. So she was fortunate enough to work in neighborhood services and the city manager's office. And some of the highlights of her time at Santa Clarita are terrific. She served as a departmental budget officer. She oversaw their public safety contract. She led their emergency management program and coordinated a very wide array of emergency responses, not just the pandemic, but the tick fire, a high school shooting, and public power shutoff events. So she brings a very broad experience in that area. And then one of the other really interesting things she got to do there was to acquire and refurbish a local ice rink that's now becoming a city ice rink and entertainment center. And it's a beautiful facility. I've seen some of the photos. When Rebecca is not busy working, she enjoys spending her free time with family and friends, and of course loves hiking. So she's found a wonderful second home in San Luis Obispo, and she's enjoying our great outdoors, and she looks forward to traveling abroad again. And I'm tormenting her by touring her all around San Luis Obispo and having walking socially distanced meetings with our masks on and giving her all kinds of historic context to some of our projects and the such like. So we are really, really fortunate to have Rebecca join our team. And so welcome her, and I'm sure she has a few remarks.
Thank you, Shelley, for such the kind words. And thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council, and Derek for such the warm welcome over these last few months. I really am so excited to be here and be a part of this incredible organization and community. I think I'm a Central Coast person now, definitely love this area. I really am passionate about local government and public service, and am eager to contribute to the incredible reputation that the city has for excellence and investment in the community, and to be among this phenomenal team of professionals and to serve the council and the community. So thank you again so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome to the team. And now we're going to move on to public comment. If you are here to speak for items not on the agenda, please raise your virtual hand, and the city clerk will know that you're here to speak. Before we get into that, I'd like to read our civility guidelines. Listen first. So we will make an honest effort to understand views and reasoning of others by listening to understand, and not listening to find fault, but instead allowing thoughtful discussion to lead to the best possible outcomes. Respecting different opinions. We will invite and consider different perspectives, allowing space for ideas to be expressed, opposed, and clarified in a constructive manner. And show courtesy. We will treat all colleagues, staff, and members of the public in a professional and courageous manner. Courageous is important, but courteous is even better. Courteous manner, whether in person, online, or in written communication, especially when we disagree. Criticize constructively. We strive to advance solutions to community issues, and when faced with disagreement, we do more than simply share our concerns with differing positions. We work to propose a course of action of mutual benefit, and debate the policy and not the person. We will focus on the issues and not personalize debate or use other tactics that divert attention from the issue. Speakers should direct their comments to the council and not the audience or staff, and should avoid personal attacks, abusive language, and other disruptive behavior. And now it is an honor to introduce Anne Havlik from the League of Women Voters to share a little bit more about our Democracy Concierge program. Teresa, are you there with helping Anne?
Yes, she's been moved over and now she'll just have to unmute her mic.
Okay, great.
So I guess I need to start over.
Yes, please start from once more with feeling, Anne.
Madam Mayor, City Council members, and members of the public, good evening. Thank you for tuning in to contribute at tonight's San Luis Obispo City Council meeting. I'm co-president Ann Havlick, representing the League of Women Voters of San Luis Obispo County Civil Discourse Team. Before COVID, when meetings were in person, it was our league's responsibility to make sure there were at least 2 league members to greet, welcome, listen, encourage, support, and offer help to needed members of the public who came to either observe or speak during public comment at regular City Council meetings. We called this meeting the Democracy Concierge Service. We met so many wonderful people and learned so much from them during our monthly service. We were so grateful for the unsolicited thank yous we received from all of you pre-COVID. Most of all, we are proud to see how many people of all ages and backgrounds from San Luis Obispo were not only proactive in attending the meetings, but also very well informed and civil when speaking during public comment, in spite of differences. Times are so much more challenging now because of the pandemic and how it has affected us both personally and economically. Yes, we live in a city filled with people who have diverse views, perspectives, values, and ideologies. Yes, opinions and likes and dislikes are as varied as the number of people in our city. And that's okay, because when civil engagement and civil communication is not just alive and well, but also thriving in our city, and our elected officials, their staff, and the public show mutual respect for each other, keep an open mind, a caring heart, and exercise curiosity over judgment by actively listening to each other with an intent to truly understand. We can and will have better outcomes when it comes to public policy. Now is the time to come together. Now is the time to find common ground. Now is the time to tap into our humanity and remember that every human being in the city of San Luis Obispo is valuable, regardless of opinions or worldviews. More than ever, we need to see each other through a lens of compassion and empathy and find ways to connect with each other on a deeper level. We need to remember that we have more in common than meets the eye, that we are more than our professional alliances or memberships in various organizations, that we are also human beings, mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, grandmothers and grandfathers, sons and daughters, residents of the beautiful county of San Luis Obispo, and residents of California. We need to remember that we are all flawed and imperfect human beings striving to find a more perfect union so we can find the path to achieve a better normal and a better new economy in the great city of San Luis Obispo. Welcome, and thank you for showing up and exercising your civil duty today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anne. That was beautiful. I'd love to see a copy of that if you don't mind sending that.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for that. City Clerk, do we have any speakers?
Yes, we have 8. The first one is Michelle M. Michelle, you'll need to unmute your mic.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for hearing me, City Council. My name is Michelle, and I just want to acknowledge that an unhoused community member passed away yesterday in Mitchell Park. And he was a dear friend of mine. And so I just want to acknowledge that. And I just want to bring up that this is the second death since February in Mitchell Park of an unhoused person, which is concerning. I don't know if this was drug related or what, but I do know that there have been numerous overdoses in the unhoused population. There are a lot of drugs that are laced with fentanyl, which includes methamphetamines. The heroin is laced. The RX prescription drugs are all laced with fentanyl. And fentanyl is very deadly. It is hard. If you're overdosing, it takes sometimes more naloxone. So I was just curious and concerned about what the city is planning on doing about this to, I don't know, to address this drug crisis. And yeah, that's it. I yield my time.
Our next speaker is Marshall James.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. I want to thank City Council and Cap SLO for implementing the policy of safe parking spots at the Railroad Square Park for people to stay in their vehicles overnight. As a resident who lives right across the tracks from the park, I offer sincere enthusiasm for the practice. Our unhoused and housing insecure neighbors deserve more projects like this, projects which center their safety and security. I also want to draw attention of the council to the fact that Bend the Arc Jewish Action has been summarily disinvited from participating in the Police and Community Together, that's the PACT initiative, which states as a goal, quote, to effect positive social change through dialogue, education, and understanding. The stated reason for Bend the Arc's dismissal was the comments of member Barry Price during the After Action Report public comment period a few weeks ago. Once again, SLO PD reacts to the expressions of free speech with retaliation in a blatant attempt to silence challenges to their control. I find it distressingly familiar. At our protest against police violence, we were met with police violence. And when a member of an organization to PACT, which is a project ostensibly started by the police to foster communication and trust within the community, actually offers constructive criticism of their violent actions and their biased self-assessments, the channel of communication is closed. Here, Acting Chief Smith reveals what we had already presumed. PACT is nothing but a smokescreen, a shield that SLO PD can point to and use to show that they listen, when clearly they only want to hear praise and submission. I say all this because I'm still disturbed by the reaction of this council to the AAR and the public comments pertaining to it. Despite 29 community members giving civil, constructive, and authentic criticisms of the report, its insufficient recommendations, and the overall behavior of SLO PD, including the civil substantive critique offered by Mr. Price of Bend the Arc, a majority of city councilors spent their reaction time focused on 3 commenters who used swear words and insults, to the near total disregard of all other commenters. Councilors Christensen and Marks even decide to throw out insults of their own towards the public, calling our beliefs ideological delusions and impulsive emotions, our request for system change mechanically repeated, and accused many of us of being outside agitators, going so far as to advocate for increasing the funding of our already bloated and militarized police force, something no public commenter spoke in favor of. Instead, the public was lashed with repeated admonishments about civility. Well, the police have demonstrated that even civility will not go unpunished, and the city council have demonstrated that civility will be ignored. So I ask, why should we be civil? Is this how it's going to be? The testimony of your constituents overlooked and denigrated, the word of police always trusted, the staunch refusal to think creatively about how we could solve the problem of increasing distrust by the police and by extension of the SLO city government and this body.
Our next speaker is Riley Delk.
Hi, I'm Raleigh with Abolitionist Action, Central Coast SLO. We're continuing to demand rent, mortgage, and utility relief and reduction in the police budget by 33% and no expansions to policing. About the last point specifically, I'd like to see transparency in the process of a potential new police station. Having asked the planning and building department and looking through the public records on InfoSlow, there hasn't been an inspection regarding seismic requirements. I understand that might be because inspections usually only occur when a permit is being sought after. I'm curious though if there's been any inspection, possibly by an outside contractor, to determine if retrofitting is an option and how much that would cost compared to a new station, which was said to be potentially 50 to 60 million. In the past, the police department has said changes need to be made, but I think proof and transparency in this process is essential. Regardless, the potential cost of a new station is unacceptable when that kind of investment could go directly to the community to increase safety. Thank you. That's all.
Our next speaker is Tim Jue. Mr. Jue, you'll have to unmute your mic.
Oh, sorry, my feed kicked in and out. I didn't realize you were calling my name. Am I on?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Tim Jue, resident of City of San Luis Obispo, he, him. I'll take a different tact. I'm going to start. My wife has asked me to specifically thank Heidi for her comments tonight leading up to the meeting. She is on an NACP meeting and is unable to attend, so I am doing her public comment for her that way. And that was a call out specifically to what Heidi said tonight. So thank you for that. I didn't really review tonight's agenda, so I don't have anything to say later on in the meeting, but I would like to, I guess I'll focus on the positive first. I would like to give a shout out to Jeff Klein at the city. He has been my go-to for a few months now with my trash service for the public, and he's been doing a great job. It's been probably saving a lot of you, a lot of communication from me and others in the city, etc. He's recently upped our dumpster on the Bob Jones Trail to a 10-yarder. So we're actually making some progress there on providing services instead of sweeps for our unhoused neighbors in many parts of the city. I also just want to say, I'm going to miss Donald. Anyone who met him, I mean, I was talking to people last night. There's a guy who lived in our city for years. He knows, I'm guessing, as much history as James Papp about the city. He was a colorful, varied character. You'll get all sorts of different stories about him, but he was a human being who lived and loved in our city. He was just entertaining one of our county supervisors just last weekend. And I know a lot of people are just going to be like, hey, there's one less eyesore out in the public. But he was a human being, and we're going to miss him. And Mitchell Park's not going to be the same. It's the city. The city is, I mean, I have a person that works, I know a friend who works in the county. She's lost 5 clients to various, I don't know, substance abuse, whatever it is. We have people missing. It's pretty sad what's going on with people disappearing and dropping like flies. I know we talk about what's going on the mission, but we also don't acknowledge what else is going on the mission about the new people sleeping on the steps, etc. We always look at the bright side. So I'm sorry if I'm turning that dark. I didn't intend to. I was trying to be positive. Yeah, I'm just really sad about what's going on out in our public spaces. And lastly, I really appreciate you, Marshall. You're trying to be as nice as you can. And I know we're all fighting back and forth of how to get things done, but he didn't place a word wrong tonight. So that's the last thing I have to say tonight. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Garrett Brisbane.
Hi, I'm Garrett. They, them pronouns. I live in SLO, and I'm also with Abolition Action Central Coast SLO, and I want to say that the police budget, we're demanding that the police budget be reduced by 33%. And what struck me with Heidi's Heidi Harmon's call out for support of the Asian community and all people harmed, I think you said something about the city stands with like all people being harmed by violence and things of that nature. But yet it doesn't seem like this council wants to defund the police, which are like harming our houses, neighbors. So I really want to believe that the council like cares about reducing violence and harm for people. But it's just like, it just sounds disingenuous. So maybe like being more serious about reducing the budget and moving that proposed like $40 or $50 million for a new police station to like buy out some hotel rooms for some houseless folks. Like, I don't really understand how that hasn't happened yet. Like, I know that y'all say 40 Prado and stuff, but as we've like returned to many times, is they have like people have to be sober there, and like that's it's necessary to like still give housing to people who are not sober. Like people who are on drugs like deserve to be safe and not like swept and all their shit stolen. So so yeah, just like the contradictions with Heidi Harmon's like speech about wanting the city wanting to like stand up for people in harm, and then like not really taking Abolition Action Central Coast SLO's demands seriously and calling them like delusions. It doesn't add up. And so the council should really like rethink the police budget. Basically, I'm pretty sure y'all are the ones who like approve it or like propose it and then approve it. So just cut the police budget, please, by 33%, and then like think about further ways to like defund in the future, because this is just the beginning. Like Abolition Action Central Coast SLO and like all abolitionists are gonna continue pressing like the city to incrementally like reduce the harm that police like are inflicting. But thanks. Good night.
Our next speaker is Kaylee Conrad.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hello, council members. Thank you for having me here. My name is Kalea Conrad. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a student and resident of San Luis Obispo, and I want to reiterate the sentiments of Garrett and Rowley and all of Abolition Action Central Coast SLO. You all state that DEI is a major city goal, but there's a consistent claim that the city council values our public comments and input, but we are proven time and time again that the interests raised by young academics and individuals who are investing time and energy into these causes to dismantle police brutality and mitigate police brutality and all of its harmful effects are not being heard. Several council members have failed to understand the negative impacts of inflated police budgets for the city and continue to do so. We are deemed as if we don't know what we're talking about. I think there is value in listening to the younger generations of people that you serve. We have heard time and time again that we will not defund, but my question to you all is, what will you do about the consistent demands from your constituents to build more equitable futures for all SLO residents, especially prioritizing Black, Brown, and Indigenous individuals and their health and well-being so that they're prioritized instead of neglected, as well as our houseless folk, as Garrett and others have mentioned. Police don't keep our communities safe, but instead access to community-based resources do, such as affordable housing and food, access to education and other essential social services. not sweeps, to keep individuals safe and nearly eliminate the need for quote unquote criminal activity that is deemed an issue. It is perpetuated by police surveillance and issues of the like. Police are a reaction to systemic lack of access to these resources and the underserving of BIPOC communities. So I'm asking you, again, please listen to your constituents and our requests to reduce the police force by 33%. I also want to reject the creation of a new police station. I want to reemphasize Riley's comment and Garrett's sentiments that that we need transparent reports on the line item reasons and costs associated with proposing a new police department. Transparency is necessary, and we want to know the reasons why the station can't be retrofitted for seismic activity instead of building a new station. We won't be silenced by complicity and violence, and police are the embodiment of racism, prejudice, discrimination, and bigotry, beginning with slavery. So please consider the deeper motivations for all of the work that individuals and acts do with earnest, and why we do this work, because we care, and there's a reason we care. Thank you for listening.
Michael Guffrey.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, City Council members. It is me again, Michael Giuffre. I use he, him pronouns, and I am a fourth-year philosophy major at Cal Poly. And I am also a member of the local grassroots organization, BLM Community Action. Don't worry, I'm going to be nice tonight, and I won't be calling anybody in, even though I probably should. So before I get into what I want to say, I first want to say some words of appreciation for Mayor Heidi Harmon and Council Member Andy Peace. Thank you so much for showing up last Thursday at the Stop AAPI Hate rally and showing that you stand in solidarity with the local AAPI community. You have continuously shown that you stand up when injustice occurs, and it makes me hopeful that city government will make improvements on diversity and inclusion and equity here in SLO. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I want to know, where do the efforts on the local BIPOC Center stand today? Back in October and November, I recall hearing promising words from City Manager Derek Johnson and some other members on City Council that if Measure G was passed, then there would be efforts to create a BIPOC Center here in SLO. Both BLMCA and DSA canvassed rigorously on behalf of Measure G, and we helped get it passed. Now that Measure G has been passed, I've not heard any updates on the SLO BIPOC Center. So I was wondering if you could touch on the efforts being made to create a BIPOC Center here in SLO. I wholeheartedly believe this is a good start in making SLO a more diverse, inclusive, and equitable community. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say on the matter. I yield the rest of my time.
Our next speaker is Alejandro. And that's
Yes,
the final speaker.
Hello, my name is Alejandro. I am a SLO community resident, longtime resident here, and I'm speaking as a community member and also as part of Abolitionist Action Central Coast SLO. And I am here tonight to repeat the message of the people calling for addressing the violence of policing, because it seems like that message is not being heard in some sectors. I wanted to say one more time, and more specifically, it's disappointing to hear Councilmember Marks commenting disparagingly on how your constituents repeat ourselves on this issue, and to hear Councilmembers Marks and Christensen say flat out that we will not defund. Now, I want to be perfectly clear here by stating flat out that you will not take the needed steps to address the violence of policing. You are placing yourselves on the wrong side of history. We don't need attempts to fix something that was never designed to keep us safe. Police don't keep us safe. This city cannot be a welcoming city for Asian Americans when police are part of the violence against us. And it cannot be part of the solution to sexual violence when police do nothing to solve it and are consistently among its biggest perpetrators. Body cameras don't fix that. More trainings don't fix that. We don't need more attempted fixes or more investments in things that continue to legitimize an institution that fails in everything except harassing, surveilling, controlling, and harming us. Because that's right, police fail in everything else. They don't solve crimes. We do not need more investments in policing in this moment. We need no expansions to policing, including no new police station. We need SLO PD defunded by 33%, and we need rent, mortgage, and utility relief for the city of SLO to fix SB 91's loopholes and close the gap. Thank you.
Thank you. City Clerk, you said there's no more speakers?
That's correct.
Great. And I know that we've gone on extensively about those comments in the past, so we don't need to do that tonight. So with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. Do we have Councilmember Pease?
Sorry, I think that there were a couple of comments from our speakers that could be addressed, answered. Specifically, I think we have either a meeting date or a memo about the police station coming out. So I'm hoping city manager can address that. And then also kind of a look ahead about the BIPOC. I mean, the center, and that we've kind of put that toward the major city goal and moving forward with that. So I'd appreciate a couple just factual updates on those couple items.
And can you add one more thing to that? Just the Prado, 40 Prado that they do allow. So people.
Oh yeah, thank you. That's, yeah.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. You know, it's always unfortunate when you heard when a member of our unhoused community passes away. We are working hard with the county on the county's very first public detox facility. Many people do not know we do not have a detox facility in this county. So the county of San Luis Obispo is working on creating a county administered detox facility. And that is to be sited next to 40 Prado. That has been approved. There's a funding gap, and all the cities are working with CAPSO right now to essentially site that facility. And then a RFP, or request for proposal, will be issued to administer and run the detox facility. So it's pretty exciting. This is part of, you know, a long-term effort of a huge gap that we have in our community. And this facility is not going to be enough. We know it's not going to be enough, but it's a step in the right direction. I want to talk about just the 40 Prado and its programming. It is a low barrier facility, and anyone is welcome. And they just need to follow the guidelines. I just want to remind our community and our council that over the last 10 years, we have focused on a service model which is designed to encourage individuals to go to 40 Prado. There are medical facilities, there's job training, there's social services, there are counselors, there are beds, there is access to store things, your personal belongings. It is a clearinghouse of resources for individuals to be able to receive services. And hence why we are encouraging individuals to go to 40 Prado, and in fact, moving people out of parks and encouraging them to go to the 40 Prado facility. That is something that we will continue to do. Just to give you an example, in the last week, we have had anywhere from 22 to 28 available beds at 40 Prado. So as the weather has gotten nicer, more individuals are sleeping outside. And that's unfortunate because we want individuals to be cared for, to get proper nutrition, to get proper medical care, and hopefully find their way out of homelessness. I also just want to mention is if anyone is suspended, they can panel back in, meaning that they can work with a counselor, work through what happened, and then ultimately get back into the shelter. If a person has been violent in any way, then they would not be ultimately repaneled into the facility. I want to talk a little bit about our CAT team, and our police department is a part of our CAT team. I just want to share some of the outcomes of the CAT team in the last year. We have worked with the county to house over 250 individuals and or reunite people with family. Those are huge outcomes. I'm proud of those outcomes, and you're going to see more of that funding for social workers in the budget. Specifically, I want to talk about the county's budget. In the 2021 year, approximately $10.6 million was available for programs and projects directly related to addressing homelessness. And funding that the county has And just to give you perspective, that's about a fifth of our budget, that the county receives state funding directly for homelessness. And that funding from the county goes to programs like the 70 Now program, which is a program designed to put individuals in housing. It's a share of the community action team. It's for local community-based organizations, service providers, to reunite individuals who are homeless with families. It's management and outreach on the streets. It's direct rapid rehouse of housing and various other initiatives. And so there's also a larger share, $157 million of the county's budget that goes towards health and human services that the unhoused residents are eligible for. This funding is primarily used for drug and alcohol programs, amongst many other supportive services. There was a mention tonight about hotel rooms, and that has been a program that was funded by the federal government to the state and to the counties. Our county has not taken advantage of that program to provide unhoused individuals that don't have COVID. I've had conversations with the county, encouraged them to pursue that program, but they have been unwilling to pursue that program for the entire county of San Luis Obispo, including the incorporated areas. I did have a conversation along with Vice Chair Stewart to speak with both Senator Laird and Assemblymember Cunningham. We talked about the seemingly disconnect between the fact that all of the funding comes to counties, yet lots of the impacts and the direct responses are provided by cities. And that's something that the senator and the assemblyperson understand and recognize. They do anticipate that discussions in Sacramento with a budget surplus of around $16 billion will contain some additional funding to counties and potentially for the first time funding to cities so that we can really provide on the ground services to those that are in need. In terms of a couple other questions that came up tonight, I do want to address the police station. There are technical reviews that have been conducted. We will be providing a memorandum to the council that covers technical studies that were done of the existing station, that looked at the alternative of a rehabilitation of that facility, looked at the cost, that looked at and explored different sites, and ultimately concluded that the most cost-effective way to approach providing police services was from the existing site, and it was the most cost-effective. And we're happy to provide that information to the council. We have taken the recommendations from the DEI task force, which was to take a pause, look at the program, evaluate whether or not it's efficient, it's effective, whether or not there are any alternatives. That's what we're doing right now with our public works team and with the police department. And we plan to come back to the city council when we have all of the information assembled. Lastly, I just want to address the comments that were made regarding PACT. I certainly am having some conversations with our current police leadership, and I'm having some conversation with our incoming police chief, Mr. Rick Scott. He recognizes that there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of trust to be built. Him and I have had some conversations about how to rebuild and recreate that trust with the community. And he'll be working on that as he goes about learning and listening to the community and hopefully forming relationships, and then thinking about what does PACT look like in 2021 moving forward. And with that, Madam Mayor, that concludes my comments, and happy to answer any other questions.
Sorry, Derek, there was one more on the BIPOC Center. So is that April 20th budget meeting would be the time to hear more about that? Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Pease. I forgot to mention that, but there will be some funding that'll be included in the DEI recommendation. One of the first steps that is taken on any of these types of efforts, and we do anticipate that this will be a public-private partnership. We've already heard from the community that there's some willingness to fund a facility like this, both on an ongoing and one-time basis for the capital, is really to set out and prepare what's called the feasibility study. The feasibility study looks at what are the anticipated uses, what are the anticipated needs, how big, what is the program and purpose, what are the costs to operate it and build it, and then looks at the potential funding sources and then identifies what gaps there are in funding and what the potential strategies to fill those gaps. And so that is one of the funding recommendations that will be coming to the City Council as part of the strategic budget direction on April 20th.
Okay, now we'll move on to the consent agenda. This is for items deemed to be non-controversial. Does anyone have anything they want to say about that? City Clerk, do we have any commenters?
No, we do not.
Someone like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move consent.
I'll second.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Christensen,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Councilmember Pease.
Yes, but I'll recuse for the second reading of item 12 on the Dana Street for the same reason that my office is on that street.
Mayor Harmon.
Yes, and with that, it passes 5-0. The next item before us is a business item to review and accept the 2020 General Plan Annual Report. Community Development Director Michael Codron and Assistant Planner Graham Bultma will please present the report.
Great, good evening, and thank you, Mayor Harmon and members of the council. It's Michael Codron, Community Development Director. I'm joined by Graham Bultima, and he is an assistant planner in the Community Development Department, and had the opportunity, this is his second year actually, pulling together the General Plan Annual Report, but it'll be his first presentation to the City Council. And there he is, all right. Just want to highlight the fact, and we were talking about this this morning during agenda review, about how the General Plan Annual Report is, more than just a report on how things are going in community development. The general plan is often thought of as the constitution of the city. It really guides a lot of our aspirational goals, policies, and programs in terms of the things that we try to achieve as a city through physical growth and economic development. And in that sense, really every city department has touched the General Plan Annual Report and contributed to our progress forward. And so this report will be a great resource for staff over the next year. We update it every year, so it's an ongoing process, but we do reference it and use it, and look forward to your input on this presentation and on your review of the report. And so Graham's going to go ahead and provide an overview and presentation of the report. I have a couple of slides in there on growth management, so I can speak to that in a little bit more depth. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Graham. And you're muted.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for that introduction. Good evening, Mayor Harmon and members of the City Council. My name is Graham Bultma, and the item I am presenting for you today is consideration of the 2020 General Plan Annual Report. Can everyone see my screen? All right. Okay. The staff recommendation for the City Council, as recommended by the Planning Commission, is to accept and file the 2020 General Plan Annual Report. The purpose of the General Plan Annual Report is to comply with the City Land Use Element Policy 11.3 and California state law, and to review implementation of general plan programs. There are a total of 8 elements in the city's general plan. This list gives an overview of the elements when they were adopted and upcoming element updates. The housing element update was completed in 2020, and updates to the parks and recreation and safety elements are currently in progress. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, the city's emergency operations plan was implemented, which established the City Council as the city's disaster council. Throughout 2020, the city adopted several resolutions as the city continued to adapt to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic locally, such as allowing downtown businesses and restaurants to expand operations to sidewalks and streets as part of social distancing efforts, and extending deadlines for discretionary approvals and building permit applications. Summaries of these resolutions can be seen in Table 1 on page 13 of the report. Throughout 2020, staff worked to improve customer service and process improvements, including upgrades to InfoSlow and implementation of the TipFast program, which streamlines review of tenant improvement projects. Staff also continue to coordinate with partner agencies on projects throughout the city. A total of 242 planning applications were received in 2020, about 30% less than 2019. The number of planning applications submitted decreased in March 2020, but started to steadily increase after March. A total of 632 building permits were issued in 2020, about 10% less than 2019. The number of permits issued decreased in the spring and the fall, but increased in the summer and winter. In 2019, the city began work on the 6th cycle housing element update and continued that work into 2020. The housing element update includes detailed information about the city and available capacity for residential development. The housing element land inventory shows that the city can sufficiently meet its RHNA allocation. The housing element includes updates to various policies and programs, as well as added new programs, several focused on housing production and streamlining. The City Council adopted the housing element in November, and in December, staff submitted the element to the State Department of Housing and Community Development for certification. In March 2021, staff received a findings letter regarding certification. HCD approved the inventory analysis and identified that additional information is needed about timing of specific plan area build-out in the city's lateral offset program, and also requested that the city expand the farm worker housing program. The 6th cycle housing element period began in January 2019 and will go through 2028. The Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, for the 6th cycle is 3,354 units, as seen here in Table 5 and on page 20 of the report. In 2020, the city permitted 465 new housing units towards quantified objectives. Regarding residential growth, Land Use Element Policy LUE 1.11.2 regarding residential growth states that the city's housing supply shall grow no faster than 1% per year on average. In 2020, 313 housing units were constructed in the city. Out of this total, 261 housing units are subject to residential growth rate limitations. The annual growth rate based on this 261 for 2020 was 1.21%. A significant portion of these new units are located within specific plan areas. LUE Policy 1.11.2 states that approved specific plan areas may develop in accordance with the phasing schedules adopted by each specific plan, provided that thresholds established by LUE Table 3 are not exceeded. The net total number of units in the city that are subject to residential growth rate limitations as of 2020 is 21,501 units, which is below the 2020 threshold of 22,190 units specified in LUE Table 3. The city has maintained a 6-year average annual growth rate of 0.6% per year from 2015 to 2020 in compliance with LUE Table 3 and the maximum average annual growth rate. And Michael, this is you. You're muted.
All right, thanks. Happens to us all, doesn't it? All right. Well, thank you, Graham, and Mayor Harmon and council members. I did want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about residential growth to put this information into context with where we currently are in our planning cycle. So as Graham described, the city is doing well with housing production and not at risk of exceeding the growth management ordinance thresholds of 1% per year on average. And Graham, okay, there we go. Yeah. That calculation excludes certain types of units like affordable housing and downtown housing, but the city's policies for growth and how we plan to accommodate new population are based on the total numbers illustrated in this table from our land use element. So these are approximations, but the goal is to manage growth so that we can accommodate a population of 57,200 people and ensure adequate water supply, emergency response, and other important government services. The city plans for a certain number of residential dwelling units to achieve its population goals, consistent with the requirements of the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. HCD actually evaluates the city's inventory of housing sites to ensure that we can meet our regional housing need allocation as part of the process of certifying our housing element. If we can go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight that this chart is intended to help illustrate that the city currently has a sufficient inventory of housing sites to support development up to our current build-out population and meet our regional housing need allocation. The yellow dashed line reflects the limits of Table 3, and the units accounted for in this chart include housing in specific plan areas, entitled infill development projects, and some assumptions about future infill projects that are allowed under our current regulations. Now there's a small sliver of this green area, about 500 residential units that's depicted on the chart that currently are not entitled and are not in the city's housing element inventory, but have been identified either in the city's housing element as an opportunity site or in the land use element as a special focus area. In addition, staff is working on infill housing programs such as the Downtown Flexible Density Program and the Missing Middle Housing Program, which are both identified in our new housing element as priority programs. Now, this doesn't mean that the city will never be looking for additional housing sites to support growth. However, it does mean that staff is not currently recommending initiation of new amendments to its general plan, specific plans, or zoning regulations to accommodate new sites for housing. In order to align with our normal planning processes, the next opportunity for this is expected to occur in 2026, which is when we would expect to receive our new regional housing need allocation from the state. At that time, staff would begin the process of identifying appropriate sites for incorporating into our next housing element update and the inventory. And we would identify other changes that might be necessary to the general plan to accommodate any further growth. In the meantime, there are thousands of units that the city has already entitled that will be developed over the coming years. And just as importantly, a number of programs for staff to implement, including an update of our inclusionary housing ordinance to ensure that the goals, the city's goals for affordable housing are met as we continue to grow. And with that, Graham, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Michael. Continuing on from residential growth to non-residential growth. In 2020, 34,352 square feet of net new non-residential floor area was added to the city. The annual growth rate for 2020 was 0.29%, which continues to be consistent with land use policies. In 2020, staff continued implementing and developing several specific plans throughout the city. Some highlights included continued construction in the Toscano, Rigetti Ranch, and West Creek developments, completed entitlement of all residential development in San Luis Ranch, and certification of the Froome Ranch final EIR in September. Staff also continued to work on updates to the city municipal code throughout 2020. The city's ADU ordinance was updated in February in response to new state legislation. Changes included removing the owner occupancy requirement and allowing units to be developed in multifamily structures. The Clean Energy Choice Program was also amended in 2020 to provide regulatory flexibility to support all electric new buildings. Progress on climate action also continued in 2020. Actions included joining Central Coast Community Energy in January, adoption of the Climate Action Plan in September, and beginning research for a building retrofit program this past fall. In 2020, the city's available water supply included 10,107 acre-feet of water, which was consistent with the city's current water supply needs. Numerous traffic signal and intersection improvements were completed as part of the city's traffic safety program in 2020. Staff also continued the engineering and environmental review process for the Prado Road Highway 101 interchange and is progressing through the design process for the Ann Holm Neighborhood Greenway Plan. The fire department continued to take steps in 2020 to improve protection of city residents and prepare for other potential dangers. One update of note this year was the department's completion of the 2019 Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan, which was formally adopted by City Council in June 2020. The fire department also continued to conduct critical safety inspections in the city in 2020. The police department also continued to make progress in 2020 towards crime reduction, traffic safety, community outreach, and police operations. Police department highlights from 2020 included a variety of training efforts, such as crisis intervention training, as well as continued coordination to promote neighborhood wellness and civility. Conservation and open space highlights from 2020 included dedication of Rigetti Hill for open space and a future trail system, continued surveys of steelhead trout along San Luis Obispo Creek, and ongoing efforts to prepare the Miyazi open space property to open for recreational use by spring 2021. Parks and Recreation staff continue to make progress in 2020 on the master plan and element update. A public review draft was released and introduced to the Parks and Recreation Commission in March 2021. Another highlight was the completion of the Islay Park Playground project in September 2020, pictured here. And for the city's public art program, new public art installations continued in 2020 as well, such as the Archway to Happiness, pictured here at the Marsh Street parking garage. To conclude, the General Plan Annual Report conforms with Land Use Element Policy 11.3 and state law, and the General Plan Annual Report provides you, the City Council, with an opportunity to review implementation of general plan programs from 2020, and any comments that the council makes during this review can be incorporated into the final report. And that concludes this presentation. I've left the staff recommendation again here for your convenience, and I'll welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do any of my colleagues have questions? Councilmember Pease?
Great. Thank you so much. Great presentation. And thank you, Mr. Codron, for the correspondence, the follow-up with questions and additional information. Very helpful. I think the one question that I still have is kind of that ratio of units to population. If you could kind of review how we calculate that and how we update it, because I know in the past we've talked about kind of concerns of overcrowding and you end up having more units, but then the same population. And so how are we kind of having the accuracy of units tied to population?
Sure. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward ratio there between the number of units and population there in Table 3. And so over time, that ratio has changed. So you're exactly right. You know, the way we live as a community, it changes over time. In some cases, you see larger households, and right now we're actually trending towards smaller households. So the last general plan, actually, the basis of this table was 2.6 people per household, and with larger families and different living environments, that was the ratio. That's where we were at. But in doing the research for the 2014 or 2015 general plan update, This new table represents more of around 2.2 people per household. And so that's something that we're tracking. It is an estimation and a population and an approximation. And so if we do know any changes in trends based on what our assumptions were when this was adopted in 2015, then we would recommend adjustments at that point. But at this point, it seems to be, our assumptions seem to be holding with respect to, around 2.2 to 2.25 people per household.
All right. So if you were seeing a change, this would be kind of the time to adjust. But at this point, the prior assumptions are, or at least the most current assumptions are holding.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Thank you.
Councilmember Marks.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I am unclear about how the change in the state law and city ordinances that is allowing ADU, or what used to be called granny units, to be built in R1 zones. And that will definitely increase the density and increase the population. I've spoken to the fire chief and to the interim chief, Smith, police chief, about the effect of densification, having more people in, living closer together in the R1 zones, how that might affect response time and calls for police protection. So are the ADU numbers being in any way factored into this projection of future populations?
Accessory dwelling units are actually considered and defined the same as a single family residence. So yes, I understand that an accessory dwelling unit creates the potential for more people to live on a single family residential lot within the city. Accessory dwelling units, they're allowed on multifamily properties as well. And this is part of state law to address the housing crisis, to create a new sort of increment of additional, more affordable housing for communities across the state. And in our efforts, we will continue to track population relative to the total number of dwellings. But ADUs are not factored separately from the single family home on that lot.
So just to be clear, the number of 57,200 that we're considering to be built out does not include people who may live in ADUs or affordable housing or other kinds of exceptions. Is that correct? These 57,200 people. Who are they? I mean, are they only the people living in R1 zones, or what?
The 57,200 are all the people, all the residents of the city that live in all of the units in the city, whether they're affordable or downtown or anywhere. So that's the population that is the urban reserve capacity. The number that's the number that we'll track. And, when we get more information from the 2020 census, certainly we'll have a lot more accurate information about population and population per household. But in terms of ADUs and growth management in particular, they are not counted against the maximum number of dwellings, but certainly the residents are factored in terms of what the population is.
Thank you.
City Clerk, are there any public speakers?
Heidi, Mayor, I have a quick question.
Councilmember Stewart.
Thank you, and thank you for a great first presentation, Graham. Thank you very much. As far as the opportunity zones, can you share a little bit more about that? I remember we talked about this right when I first came on council, and there was concerns about concerns from others or in the community about who can purchase in the opportunity zone, and what do we look, can we help out in any way of keeping that more local investors versus global corporations? I don't know that we have that ability, but figured I'd ask.
I do remember us talking about opportunity zones, and I'm failing to connect it specifically to a city program, other than the sort of agreements that we have in our specific plan areas that are like local preference programs for employees to purchase homes in those new neighborhoods, and to try to discourage investors, essentially, so that we can do a better job of affecting our jobs housing balance with the new units that we're creating. Am I on point there with your question?
You are. Thank you very much. Just wanted to see if anything had changed from there. I know we talked about recently how there was concern around not welcoming people as far as our DEI efforts with having the local preference, and at the same time not wanting to have global large corporations come in and buy out houses. So kind of finding that happy medium seems to be a bit challenging.
Yeah, and thank you, Councilmember Stewart, for the clarity in that question. And we did experience some pushback from HCD when our housing element went forward with a specific program as it related to that, and we ended up removing some of that language. But we do, still, we have the ability. It is legal for us to negotiate those kinds of provisions in our development agreements, and even as conditions of approval, to the extent that the developer is in agreement that that's a program that they want to pursue. And so we'll continue to do that. I think that they seem to be effective, and it's right now we're the first project with that type of program. Well, besides Sarah Meadows, which was the first one, but now San Luis Ranch has started with vertical construction, and so we're getting updates on on how they're implementing the program and making sure that they're offering those units to the people that are eligible on their list of interested parties. They share that list with us, so we can confirm that they're following the agreement. And so far, it's going well, but we'll probably need to wait a little bit of time before we really can assess the effectiveness.
Thank you.
Sure.
City Clerk, are there any public speakers?
Yes, there are. I waited a minute because I saw a hand go up and down. Eric Justison?
There we go. Thank you very much for letting me into your meeting. Good evening, Mayor Harmon and members of the council, and thanks for allowing me to speak on this. First, I want to thank staff for engaging with me over the last couple months on the topic I want to bring up. And I'd like to refer you to the letter I submitted that's in the council correspondence pack earlier, which really lays out kind of my whole point. I'd like to ask the council to provide direction to staff and us to process an airport area specific plan amendment to allow a mixed use project at the corner of Vachel and Venture Lane, the gateway into the Avila Ranch property. Here's why. I think that the analytics provided by staff is excellent. And at the same time, it's kind of a blurry line as to where the build out really exists or where it doesn't. We're tracking pretty far below a 1%. We're at 0.6. And for decades, we've really lagged behind in the production of housing, most notably multifamily managed quality apartments. That's really been lagging. And we have an expanding workforce. The majority of people can't afford to live here that work here, 80% of them. They can't afford to buy homes. And so a rental project is really imperative. We, what they want is quality, stable housing to get a foot in the door so they can earn their way to put a down payment on a home if they're seeking to buy. And many people just seek to rent. And it's not for everybody. That's, I think, important to remember. This is for a segment of the population that, they don't maybe desire to own, or it's appropriate for them. Ultimately, we know this because the lease up rates are super fast, and projects like this are in high demand. Why this project sits at the gateway to Avila Ranch and probably should have been taken into consideration in terms of zoning back when Avila Ranch went through. It's this one in the Melton piece. It's zone manufacturing. And if in the next, 8 years until the next cycle rolls around, it's simply zone manufacturing, it's likely to become something that might not be the best fit for that area, as I've described. It's compatible with most of your city council goals in terms of housing and equity. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. City Clerk, are there any other speakers?
No, there are not.
Yeah. Can you help us understand what the barrier is to Mr. Justison's idea, especially if it is 100% affordable, deed restricted, low, very low, and moderate income folks out there?
Well, I, would like to just speak generally to the concept about housing inventory, and that currently we have sufficient housing inventory to meet our regional housing need allocation, which includes extremely low, very low, low, and moderate income housing, as well as above moderate income housing. There are a number of properties across the city that are similarly situated. And so I don't know that it's a conversation where we're just talking about one particular property where there is a willing property owner to develop affordable housing, because there's another property that's 10 acres that's situated right next to it. There are properties in other parts of the airport area where additional housing has been expressed as an interest, including properties in the Margarita area, as well as a lot of land just on the perimeter of the city, where the city lately has been getting inquiries about annexation and future development. Now, to be sure, some of these are really long-term plans. So we're going to engage in some of these conversations, but actually initiating a specific plan amendment or general plan amendment confers rights to move forward and develop. My staff has analyzed the situation, and I've considered it carefully, and we don't feel like we could recommend an initiation of a specific plan amendment in this case, because it would not be consistent with our growth management regulations. That's our analysis, and it's a pretty high level analysis at this point, because we don't have an application that we are evaluating. We're not doing a detailed, environmental impact report on this request, because frankly, we've just adopted a housing element. We've got some priority programs that we have to implement in the next year, including that update to the inclusionary housing requirement. These are things that we would like to get into place in terms of housing programs. So when that next batch of units comes forward into our inventory, all of our new policies and programs can be implemented, and our future housing can reflect, those aspirational goals and what the council and community has established as its sort of vision for housing in the future of San Luis Obispo. And it seems like enabling, properties, in different parts of the city that haven't been considered for residential in the past, sort of short circuits the process and may not lead to the best decision making as well. These are properties in this particular area that are zone manufacturing, that are adjacent to other properties that are zone manufacturing. Some pretty significant manufacturing, in fact, in terms of concrete batch plant, air bowl block. And it's different than other properties in the area. I think Avila Ranch, was mentioned, which was a big part of our major land use and circulation element update. So that's not the type of process that we're in right now, and so we wouldn't recommend going down that path at this particular point in time. But we do think that there, are opportunities to do that, relatively soon in the development world when we get our new regional housing need allocation from the state. And in the meantime, there are also a number of properties that are identified. I think a couple that were mentioned in the memo that I sent was like the Pacific Beach High School property on the corner of Los Osos Valley Road and Froome Ranch Road is one. And then the strawberry fields on Los Osos Valley Road next to Los Verdes Park 1 and 2, that's a property where the property owner has already indicated a real interest in upzoning from the R1 and R2 designations that are currently in our general plan. They want to do affordable rental housing on that property and provide, more affordable housing. So we want to be flexible with those properties that are already identified in our planning documents as appropriate for housing. And if there's any extra, inventory available that can be developed under our, general plan growth limits and our population goals, I think we've already identified those. And we'll be working on missing middle. We'll be working on flexible density. These are all ways to promote compact urban form and to promote smart growth so that we grow smartly rather than sprawl out into the periphery of the community. So that's a little bit of insight into where staff and I stand in terms of our recommendation on this. And of course, we'll happy to engage in terms of further questions or take direction from the council, if a majority wants to chart a different course for staff.
Madam Mayor, if I may just add just one more comment. I think one of the areas that Michael and I have had having some conversations about, I think I'm just looking at the long range planning project list, and we've got about 35 different policy initiatives underway. And some of those will affect the build out. And those are going to be policy questions for the council. And those are zoning initiatives. So whether it's missing middle, flexible density bonus, there are a variety of different long-range planning efforts that are underway that are going to impact ultimately, potentially the general plan and require a general plan amendment. And so we're just trying to get our arms around all of those pieces in motion that the council has already underway, and just understand if we start to entertain general plan amendments in and around the city, what does that do to that variable? It starts to really feel like a comprehensive general plan update. And so that is really the kernel of the struggle that we've been having internally, and just managing all the ambitious policy initiatives that the council has right now and trying to bring order to that, because that can quickly get away from you. And that's why cities typically do this as a comprehensive update and coordinate it with the land use and circulation element, because those two elements work hand in hand. So just to give you a little broader context, we'll have some greater clarity as we move forward with the missing middle and the flexible density programs, which I think support some of the general plan objectives, which are around infill development. And so those are some of the policy signals that I think we still want to encourage and maintain for our city. Doesn't mean that they're mutually exclusive to other development types, but there is a real loading order that we have to maintain in order to have kind of a logical sequencing and planning involved to think to some of the comments that Councilmember Marks raised earlier around the provisions of services.
Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah. So this is obviously a very good question, Mayor, and we certainly heard from Mr. Justison, and I know we've heard from Mr. Justison about this topic individually as well. And I have been thinking about it a lot, and here's the thing. What we're being asked to do is basically at the high level policy level. We're being asked to make a general plan or specific plan amendment. That's a big thing. The carrot that we're being asked to think about more is this great idea of 100% affordable housing. So it gets very tempting to say, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, let's do an amendment. But I think what staff has been trying to say, and what I talked a lot about with Mr. Justison about it, was that that it really, it really comes down to, are we going to follow our general plan or not? And if we hadn't done much with our general plan lately, if we hadn't updated it lately, it'd be like, oh yeah, we need to do some of these things. But we literally have gone through our land use and circulation element update only a few years ago, and we literally just went through our housing element update literally a few months ago. And where was this project then? Mr. Justison sat on the loose task force with me in 2014. And not to say that things don't change, but staff's analysis is telling us that to add something like this in, or any amendment, is going to possibly trigger our build out cap, violation. And that's a pretty important number. It is a little fuzzy, but as there's been a lot of talk by staff just now about, all the things that are going in to those numbers, and we know what they are, and we know where we're getting them from. And so I'm tempted to request this, but in reality, I think that's not good planning. It's not good process. It very well may trigger things that we don't want to have happen, and it definitely sets a very bad precedent for other properties and other situations in town, which I know there are a number of them. So I appreciate the fantastic advocacy that Mr. Justison has made on behalf of his client, but I haven't been persuaded personally, and it'd be interesting to hear what other what other council members say. And we can be talking about that. I also wanted to bring up one other. I know there were some typos and that kind of thing that were caught earlier by these questions that came in earlier, and staff responded to. There was one. There was one question around the homestay page 37 of the report, and it basically said that we did these homestay rules because of the protect the health, welfare, and safety of the public. And I just really want to ask if the council, if they'll support directing staff to add a phrase about it were also implemented to protect the viability and availability of our resident and worker housing stock, because that was the discussion we had. I was brand new on the council. I must have missed the findings, because I was shocked to find out that phrase was not in the findings and isn't in the ordinance, because that was the reason that we passed the homestay ordinance, is we wanted to protect our housing stock from short-term vacation rentals, which are obviously far more lucrative and easier to do for some people than to actually rent to real renters and real workers. So that's the one direction I wanted to give to staff to revise the wording in this report. And I'm certainly open to listen to other thoughts and discussion items. And I don't know if we want to have our break first and then come back, or what?
Well, we just have one more speaker, Vice Mayor Stewart.
Are we discussing right now, or do we have any more public comment?
That was it for public comment.
Okay, great. Just want to make sure. Sorry. So as far as can you remind me, please, with Avila Ranch, when the build out is supposed to be completely done?
My understanding from today is that they're looking at about an 8-year time frame for build out.
So at the same time as we'd be looking at redoing the housing element at that time? Okay,
Yeah,
cool. Thank you. And then zoning this fall, I know we talked about kind of re-looking at that. What's the timeline? September-ish?
Yes, that's the time frame for zoning regulations cleanup.
Cool.
So it's a sort of a routine set of amendments that we're going to bring forward based on input that we've had over the year.
And then as far as the manufacturing part next to Avila Ranch, that little rectangle, I guess you could call it, looking at the long range aspect of this, looking at like people saying 20 years down the road, looking back and wondering, why did they put this huge manufacturing right next to housing? And not that we did it in that direction or that order, but I could see that question being brought. If we still wanted to make any sort of change around that area, we still have time in the future before a project is brought in, right? Or
Yes.
is it like instant when someone says, in manufacturing, I fit the zoning, I'm good, and not brought to this council?
Correct. So I think I misunderstood at first. Yes. So right now, the zoning would allow for certain uses to be developed essentially by right. So there are 2 10-acre properties at that location on Venture Lane.
Right.
And, there are a range of uses that are allowed there that would require, architecture review, planning commission review, and then could go to a building permit from there. So it wouldn't necessarily come to the city council unless it was on appeal or if it was part of a subdivision, but still you would be evaluating the consistency of the project to what the current standards are.
Mm-hmm. And because part of my challenge is, since the Avila Ranch isn't built out completely. I mean, yes, I agree, Councilmember Christensen, I do like the carrot of the affordable housing, but really I'm looking at more of long-term of, well, we don't really know what it looks like completely once all that housing is built out, if that manufacturing would be a major challenge for those who live there. And because of the way that obviously just planning has worked and what we're looking at in the future, are we causing a problem for the future residents of that area? So I guess I'm just wondering, is there any way to kind of carve that out, not necessarily to say to build on it, but just to pause on that for the time while we see what that looks like for the build out? I guess that's sorry, I'm really confusing how I'm saying this, but
no, I think
I look at when the housing is built out, what does that look like for them that live, for the people who live there?
Yeah. Well, we have a development plan for Avila Ranch, so we certainly understand, what the adjacencies are going to be like and how that project is going to develop. But we have the whole analysis from the land use and circulation element update of the general plan, and then the EIR for Avila Ranch that looked at, noise exposure and a variety of other considerations. A development on a manufacturing property. I know that the neighboring property owners to the one we've heard about tonight are also interested in thinking about some type of mixed use housing project. And so I don't know whether it, as property owners, whether it makes sense to them to develop in the meantime, or whether to have a little bit longer planning horizon and see if in the future this would become a residential property. We, do have a balanced general plan, as of 2015 in terms of the land uses that contribute in terms of economic development and jobs to the city's well-being in that sense, and then our residential properties that from a financial standpoint, right, cost more. And so there are, the city of San Luis Obispo is a little bit jobs rich, being the county seat and the job center, for the county. And so I think that over the past few years, with housing and housing production in particular being a major city goal, we've made good progress there. So there was mention that, in the presentation tonight, that we've, over the past 5 years, our growth has been at a 0.6%, where our target is 1%. But last year we were 1.2%, and we expect to actually be, up at that elevated level now for a few years to come, given all of the planning approvals that we have entitled. And so it's not an exact science in terms of the number of units. It's more about the process and priorities, and that there's nothing in the city policies currently that just would be a basis for me to recommend to the city council, a rezoning or general plan amendment in these cases. And so I'm like, my kind of message to the city council is that that's not my recommendation, and that there will be time to consider additional residential properties in the future. And all these other considerations about the timing and the housing crisis and how important that is, those are difficult decisions, but they do rest with the council. And so, we can take that direction. It's it will be here in time where we will be able to welcome and identify in a more exhaustive and sort of holistic process what the next, where the next good residential properties are. And at that point, we'll be able to consider them all together. And I just, we're in this point in time, we're not really able to do that. And that it still may be attractive to the city council. I totally understand that. And so we're just trying to give you the information you need to make the best decision possible, whatever that might be.
Councilmember Pease.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I think Councilmember Christensen worded that well, and in the sense of tempting, and we have a general plan, and so to Mr. Codron's point, I think that it's a bigger process. There's multiple properties. We don't want to be capricious in kind of spot zone, changing those kinds of allocations. And we'll have an opportunity again in the future to take a look at that. So I do support the report as is, and not giving further direction to make changes. Again, also appreciating the effort and the thoughtfulness of wanting to provide that housing, but to the point of we've got policies and programs in place, so hopefully we can get that affordable housing, both deed restricted and market rate affordable, or more affordable through that process. That's my only comment. I also support the modification to the wording on homestay. I think that was certainly my understanding and appreciation for that program, which is, I think, critical in terms of maintaining our housing stock for residential use. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Pease. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Well, I have to agree with Councilmember Pease and Christensen. I admire the energy and the effort to try to deal with this one particular piece of land. But this is what we're looking at is the 2020 General Plan Annual Report. This isn't really exactly on our agenda. So I would, when the moment is right, I would like to be able to move that we review and accept the General Plan annual report.
Do we have
Thank
a second?
Do you support my change to the
Yes.
homestay? Thank
Yes,
you.
yes, of course. Yes.
Are we ready to make that motion or anything? I'll second
Well,
it.
I'm ready. I
Yeah,
just
I'll second.
hope
I'll second the motion with that
Okay.
change to the homestay language.
City
Okay.
Clerk?
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Councilmember Christensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart,
Yes.
Mayor Harmon.
Yes, and with that, it passes 5-0. We will take our break. It'll be 10 minutes. We'll be back at 8:22. All right. The next item before us is to approve amendments to council policies and procedures regarding order of business and adding a policy regarding social media. So City Attorney Dietrich and City Clerk Teresa Parrington will please present the report.
Mayor and Council, the item before you tonight is to amend the council policies and procedures. The recommendation is to amend the council policies to procedures to add the 2 items to the order of business and to add a new section 4.5 regarding social media. Under the order of business, we are requesting that you add the city manager report under presentations and move appointments under consent. While appointments are an important part of the council's while appointments to the city's advisory bodies are very important, they are very rarely controversial and meet the definition for items on consent. Council or the public can request that the appointments be removed from consent to provide comment or clarifying questions or for full discussion. During the pandemic, the city manager reports have been an effective way to keep the council and the public up to date on city programs and projects. This concludes my portion of the presentation. I will now turn it over to the City Attorney, Christine Dietrich, who will present the information regarding the social media policy.
You're muted.
I apologize. Thank you, Teresa, and thank you, Council, for the opportunity to bring this before you tonight. As you know, this is a matter that we've been talking about for some time. And what we have before you tonight is amendments to section 4.5 of your existing council policies and procedures, which is your electronic mail provisions and the relationship between electronic mail and the Public Records Act and the Brown Act in particular. And that governs the appropriate usage of email in compliance with both of those provisions and has been in place for quite a long time. Section 4.5 now is proposed to be renamed to include not only electronic mail, but social media policy and the Public Records Act and the Brown Act, and is amended to include section 4.5.2, which is private social media and digital communications. Oh, looks like I've okay, my order's out a little bit. So the intent of the social media changes is to ensure that council members are aware that digital and social media communications, just like email and every other form of record and communication among public officials, using private networks and accounts or devices may also be subject to laws regarding freedom of speech, records retention and production, and public transparency. And this has become really a very central legal battleground over the last few years. And then also talk to the council about establishing parameters for the management of public, private, and political digital and social media accounts, because folks have so many different uses for social media that it is becoming increasingly important to put some definition around the communications to avoid not only liability for the city and for individuals related to compliance with laws, but also clarity for the public and the avoidance of confusion regarding the distinctions between when a public official is speaking as a representative of the public entity, as a private person, or as a politician or someone involved in a campaign. Next slide. Just for a little bit of context, obviously not so much for the council, but just for members of the public that might be listening, the city does not provide support, provide or support individual social media accounts for council members. I believe many, if not all of our council members and mayor do or have at some point maintained private social media accounts that through which they convey public content. So conveying, especially during COVID, that it's been a very, very valuable communication tool to get messages out about public safety to a variety of constituencies. And we've been glad to have council members be able to do that to supplement the city supported platforms. But for the public's benefit, the city does not provide content for or monitor or support or provide IT support for those private accounts. Those are individually maintained by council members and the mayor. And similarly, there is no California law requiring public officials to use only government accounts to conduct public business, but there is there shouldn't be an expectation of privacy if personal accounts are used to conduct the public business. And that really is what the policy is intended to clarify going forward. Next slide. And so the components of the policy we'll just briefly go over. It provides that a council member or a member participating in digital or social media shall maintain and clearly delineate between those separate accounts and what the purposes are. So if it's an official account, the policy suggests that the public official should be making it clear that the content there has been approved by, endorsed by, and is intended to convey official city messages, albeit through those private avenues, versus a personal account or a campaign statement account that should be labeled differently, and the policy provides for what should and shouldn't be associated with each of the separate types of accounts. Next. And then as it relates to personal and campaign accounts, the policy provides that no statements, headings, profile pictures, or biographies shall be made in the name or the position to which the council member or mayor was elected. And again, that is to avoid confusion by the public that any individual speaking their own opinion or their own position on a particular issue, even if it's a city issue, in their personal capacity is not necessarily representing the city. And so the policy, and most policies, provide that there should be no overlap between the official logos and marks and positions on the private personal accounts. And
Christine, I'm sorry, can you, is it okay if I interrupt to ask a question? I'm not clear about this top statement here. To avoid ambiguity, statements, headings, profile photos, biographies shall not be made in the name of the, tell me more about that. I understand the logo piece completely, but tell me what that's saying. That doesn't make sense to me completely.
So it's the difference between having a personal account, or a campaign account that is Heidi Harmon for mayor versus Mayor Heidi Harmon. So it's not meant to suggest that you can't indicate what office you're running for in a campaign account, but there needs to be a distinction that you are not doing that activity or making statements on that account in your official capacity, but rather in your capacity as a candidate. And likewise, on a personal account, if you have a position that has not been adopted by a majority of the council, but is nonetheless something that you want to personally comment on, there should be a distinction on that personal account that makes it clear that this is my Heidi Harmon account versus this is my Mayor Heidi Harmon account.
How explicit do you need to be? Could you just say Heidi Harmon, the end, and I could post, or do I have to say Heidi Harmon, comma, this is not in any way, I am not even remotely important. The end.
Each and every one of you are important. Nonetheless, my strong recommendation would be that you include on those private and election campaign accounts a disclaimer at the top that makes that distinction really clear. That the statements and positions reflected on this page are those of candidate Heidi Harmon for mayor or Heidi Harmon as an individual, and do not reflect the official positions of the city of San Luis Obispo. Okay, Teresa, next, please.
Councilmember Stewart, do you have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I do. It's about the biography part. Totally appreciate everything that's been said so far. However, in like the biography, I'm picturing like LinkedIn right now. It's obviously a private section. However, when you list all the things you've done, you know, it's kind of like a resume. One of the things is council member, mayor, whatever it may be. So that's one thing where I'm not sure how to delineate that in that moment.
And so what I would understand that to set as a standard is you're not putting at the top of your resume council member Erica Stewart and then doing your biography. The fact that you held the job of council member, yes, you don't have to delete factual statements from your resume. But
the say elected official versus my title, then it should be fine in that little bio part.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And I think even city council member in the bio, just not at the top where you put your name, address, whose resume is this, you're not putting council member Erica Stewart.
Yeah, it just has a little, you know, the little bio blurb is like literally right after your name. So that's why I'm thinking of that one specifically.
Right.
Thanks.
Is anyone else? I'm sorry, I can only see some of you on the side, so I want to make sure I'm not missing anyone with a hand up before we move on. Okay.
I'm not seeing any hands.
Okay, great. And so here again, statements on official sites and accounts shall contain only official city positions, policies, or announcements, and all content or communications should be presumed to be subject to the California Public Records Act. So when you are expressly putting yourself out there as speaking in your official role for the city, care should be taken to make sure that only officially city-supported positions and statements are made. And by definition, official statements by public officials about subject matters within their jurisdiction are public records and therefore subject to records retention and California Public Records Act disclosure. And then if a council member receives an electronic communication regarding city business on one of the personal accounts, because inevitably we recognize that the public does not make these lines, does not understand these lines nearly as brightly as the legislature appears to, we would ask that through the training that you receive through the city, that you forward that information to an official city account for transparency so that we can ensure that we are able to capture and retain, consistent with our legal requirements, all of that content. Next. And then digital records that relate to the public business are required to be saved in a manner that is capable of being maintained for the applicable retention period. And for most public records, that's 2 years. There are some differing standards, but a good rule of thumb to presume as it relates, I think, to social media content, there's very little I could think of on social media that would be subject to a longer retention period. And this can be done, and I will admit to having had a much more tech-savvy person help me with how we might go about doing this. And thank you, Ian Levy, for your support on this endeavor. Can be done using highlights, bins, or archives for temporary and disappearing stories, reels, posts, or otherwise. And to the extent that council members need technical advice on how to do those things, which I most certainly would, we will provide some IT direction to assist you in understanding how to do those things. And again, public officials should avoid deleting comments or blocking individuals on official pages or sites they maintain. And this is a should, because under normal circumstances, it's a shall, but the law does recognize that there is content that is imminently threatening, harassing, discriminatory, that just is not properly maintained on a public forum. And so we're leaving a little bit of room for that type of judgment call. In the event that you make that type of judgment call on your official privately maintained account, I would still ask that you screenshot that material and save it. So even if you're taking it down from public view so as to avoid, engaging in discriminatory conduct, for instance, which is well advised, we need to retain a record of what content you've removed and the reasons why. And
you might want to put that suggestion into the policy.
Okay.
Because you're telling us 5, but us 5 will be gone one day, and they might. There isn't anything in there, but about what to do, because as you note, that the likelihood of something like that happening is pretty darn good these days, unfortunately. So, so your suggestion about screenshot is very, very important.
We can add that in. And thank you for that suggestion. And then, again, there's been a lot of discussion about blocking, and I think often blocking happens for the same set of reasons, that folks are being, continually intimidating, harassing, derogatory. And unfortunately, those judgment calls made by public officials have not fared well in the courts, even where they may seem to reasonable people to be perfectly reasonable choices to have made. And we'll talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. This is the language that was recently amended in the Brown Act relating to how public officials may and may not conduct themselves on public media. And there's a couple of different things happening here, and I'm not going to read all of the language specifically. We'll break it down a little bit in just a second. But one of the things that's happening is the legislature has said it's perfectly okay for each individual council member to maintain a social media account and using that social media account to answer questions, provide information to the public, or solicit information to the public within your subject matter jurisdiction. So they're not trying to foreclose it as an individual elected representative public engagement tool. The second clause is a member of the legislative body shall not directly respond to any communication on an internet-based social media platform within your subject matter jurisdiction by any other member of the legislative body. And that really is a pretty monumental shift in the Brown Act from what has historically been the case, because as you all know, and the public may or may not, a majority of the body has always been prohibited from discussing amongst themselves, deliberating, acting upon, forming a collective concurrence about matters within your subject matter jurisdiction. This goes further and says in the social media world, discuss among yourselves means, and Teresa, you can go to the next slide where it's just a little more simply stated, means any two of you interacting on that social media platform constitutes a violation of the Brown Act. And I think there are some public policy reasons behind that, not the least of which is that it is so open and so easy to interact that it is just very easy to step on those landmines along the way and very quickly trip over into a collective concurrence or a discussion, even where it might not have been intended. And because people are maintaining these separate accounts, it's also a lot easier without full transparency to the public for one member to go sort of shop opinions on other members' sites, and then through sort of a serial meeting or a serial like or dislike, really form a collective concurrence. So I think those are the policy reasons behind it, but the way the act reads is a little bit complicated because on the one hand, it speaks to the communications each of you are having with your constituents and prohibits a majority of you, which is the typical language, from discussing those interactions. But then the next clause is it prohibits any two of you from interacting on social media on anything within your jurisdiction. So those are two sort of nuanced, slightly differing, but kind of game-changing different things that are happening under the Brown Act as it relates to social media. Okay, next slide. And again, the council member prohibition on not using internet-based social media to discuss official business includes private messages, comments, likes, shares, or other digital icons that express reactions to communications. The private message component of that, frankly, is a little bit puzzling to me because I'm not certain, frankly, how that differs from email. But nonetheless, the legislature has deemed social media fundamentally different in all of those ways and prohibited even two-way communication. And yeah, so that's AB 992, and that's been the law since last year, and is now incorporated into your policy. Next slide.
That was the last slide.
Oh, okay. Well, I lost a couple of things. So I was going to talk about a couple of court cases and just in general, the focus of the court cases, including the Trump case, have been about whether or not the social media platform is a First Amendment public forum. And the vast majority of the cases have concluded that it is a public forum if a public official is conducting any public discussion of public business. So the court is very much compared that to the new public square and concluded that everyone is welcome, must be welcomed there and cannot be excluded from those civic conversations that happen on social media. What is less clear is the public records component. And there's a little bit of a conundrum here in my mind because the courts have said very clearly, this is an open public forum, everyone can participate, everyone can speak. And yet for Brown Act purposes, it's not a public enough forum to be transparent enough to qualify as an open public meeting. So there's a little bit of a logical disconnect there, but nonetheless, that's where the law has landed. Also less clear is the public records component as it relates to the private personal accounts where you may nonetheless be commenting on or discussing public business, but not making it clear that it's not in your official capacity. And then your campaign accounts, where you clearly are going to be discussing public business because you're going to be running for office and discussing the variety of things that you've done or want to do within the jurisdiction of the city. And those campaign records, in my mind, should in no way, other than the filings that are made with the FPPC, campaign communications can't be city records because you can't use city resources, technology, tools to campaign. And yet, I think the clear wave of the law is headed towards any of those public discussions, regardless of the forum, may be subject to Public Records Act production. And that is how I would advise the council to presume that will go, even though it's not particularly clear at this moment. And Council Member Stewart, I think is your hand up, or is that still from before?
Okay. No, it is. Thank you. So can you go back to one thing, the Brown Act? So typically that's majority. So in this world, it would be 3. Can you refresh again the 2 versus 3 issue there?
So all 5 of you are permitted under the new legislation to conduct exchanges, two-way exchanges with your constituents. And the prohibition there is you cannot discuss amongst a majority of you any of that content. That's not different than, all of you getting an email from constituents and 2 of you can discuss it, but 3 of you can't. So that makes sense to a certain extent. But then the next clause is no 2 of you may interact with, no council member can interact with any other council member's social media. So that's
the part I'm talking about right there.
That 2-party interaction between any 2 people is now a violation of the Brown Act.
It doesn't make any sense, but okay.
It would seem, I went around on this for a long, long time because it seemed to me that first and a majority, nothing herein is, Teresa, if you go back to the slide with the actual language on it, it seemed to me that that first shall not be construed as preventing a member of the legislative body from engaging in separate conversations, provided that a majority of the members of the legislative body do not use the internet-based social media platform. It seemed to me that was subsumed by the next clause, which says, forget the majority, it's only 2 now.
It makes total sense to me, because if the third person, if 2 people engage, then the third person just has to look at it to then have, a majority. So
that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, Councilmember Pease, thank you. That's, I think, the policy reason behind it, is because this forum is so open that it's very easy to cull private information, private conversations and form just by observing a collective concurrence on an issue.
And then one other question. What I didn't see mentioned in any of these slides is the, let's say someone is at public comment and they say, I am City Council Member Stewart, but I'm not here as a City Council member. That to me already kind of says, you're saying you're the City Council member. So is there going to be something in here as well that says, you can have the disclaimer that you're here, but on your own, speaking as an individual, but you don't say your title?
Yes. I mean, you can say something to the effect of, the opinions expressed on this page are solely the individual opinions of Erica A. Stewart and do not in any way represent the position of the city of San Luis Obispo.
I mean, when you go and speak, let's say I'm speaking at the school board or wherever else, then if I say I'm City Council Member Erica A. Stewart, but I'm not standing here as council member, you've already let the group know that you're council member. So that's what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily said out loud in this.
It's not, and it's a nuance, and it's one that arguably doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the distinction would be, Councilmember Stewart, is you shouldn't go up to the podium and say, I'm Councilmember Erica Stewart. You should go up to the podium and say, I'm Erica Stewart, and I'm here speaking as an individual and not a representative of any organization.
Yeah, thank you.
Jan Marks, I have a question.
Yes, Councilmember Marks.
So just to be clear, if I wanted to exchange a recipe with Andy Pease or Erica or Carlin or Heidi Harmon, say, hey, I've got this great Thai curry recipe.
Perfectly fine.
Personal to personal. It's like, hey, this is not, this would be allowed, right? We can talk about stuff that is completely outside of the city's jurisdiction. It's just like, would you please feed my cat? I'm going to be away for the weekend, this kind of stuff. That's okay. It's just when we're in the subject matter that belongs to the city that we have to be really careful. And is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay, good.
Last I checked, Ty Curry was not within the subject matter jurisdiction.
Well, okay.
But as a
Thank you.
policy matter, you could direct otherwise.
Thank you. City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
No, we do not.
I have
All right.
one more question.
Councilmember Stewart?
So obviously we may not have everything perfect right now in all of our social media personally. So do we have a couple of days to get everything cleared up, or how does that look?
My recommendation would be just don't delete anything that is arguably within the scope of the policy. It doesn't need to be, produced until it's asked for. The problem arises when it's asked for and it doesn't exist. So that the recommendation is just preserve for anything that's even borderline for the requisite period. If you have accounts on which you conduct public business that automatically delete content prior to what our retention period would otherwise require, then we should probably talk about that and talk about having IT capture snapshots in time such that we are always able to maintain the 2-year retention period. And if there's council consensus, I will add to the policy the language suggested by Councilmember Christensen regarding the ability to remove, discriminatory or threatening content, but to preserve the content even if removed.
Screenshot it and send it to you.
I'd be happy to move staff's recommendations with that modification.
Mayor, we had someone raise their hand
Oh, sorry.
for public comment if you'd like to take that quickly.
Sure.
Okay, Tim Joy. Sorry, I'm getting over there to move him over.
There we go. Are you there? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I know this is a really sticky subject, and I appreciate Christine's research on this. We're under surveillance 24/7 in public, and it's really tough. But I think that when you throw your hat into the public ring, you give up your privacy. We're looking at it kind of from a discussion of, from the wrong way. We're looking at it. What are people doing in private that the public doesn't know about? And that's a lot of all the problems that we have with our trust with public officials, everything else. I mean, recipes or whatever. I mean, we're not meant to be friends here in the public realm. And that's, if that's nice, that's helpful and everything. But we just have to, these rules and regulations as far as collusion, behind the scenes, backroom dealing. When you become a public figure, you are giving up a whole lot of rights that the rest of the public, I think, needs to be reserved. And we've always seen it the other way around. The president doesn't get a right to privacy when I'm going to be videotaped in public and videotaped on a bus and I have to take my shoes off on an airplane. It's just not fair. And so I think that the discussion is extremely valuable and important. And if I was a public official, I should not be able to have private conversations in my home about public policy with someone who may be offering me dinners or have a vested financial interest just because I'm not talking to another public official. So I am 100% for anything that is funded by the public, anything that's discussed with public policy, anybody who is an elected official, they are in the public view 24/7. I mean, I would go so far as to say you have a team of people following you around, recording and videotaping you. Sorry, it's brutal. And that's one of the reasons I don't want to do it, because I believe in, in privacy. So it's a very difficult subject, but I think that these are good steps to take. And I really appreciate Andy's very intelligent assessment of the situation of, wait a second, if these two people are discussing it, that means I get to, because I mean, you know, I'm talking to my friends during city council meetings right now. You guys don't know that, but we're not the public officials. So if I was a public official, I should not have that right to be sitting texting my friends on the side, getting opinions that the rest of the public is not aware of. So 100% transparency. And when you're done with that, you should be able to leave the public sphere and go back and have your privacy. Thank you so much.
Great. Was there a motion?
I just like to make a comment first before the motion, which is that I really appreciate all of this good advice and research that the city attorney has done. I think it not only protects the public, but it also protects each of us as a city council member. And I appreciate what Tim Jouet was saying. So you know, I wish that we'd had this guidance earlier, but we have it now. And so I'm definitely in favor of this. And I would like to move the staff recommendation with the addition of the language that we were talking about.
I thought Andy already moved it.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I'll second it then. How's that?
Okay.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Pease?
Yes.
Councilmember Marks?
Yes.
Councilmember Christensen?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Stewart?
Yes, and I just want to thank you for all this hard work. I know it was a lot to go through, and thank you for the clarity.
Mayor Harmon?
Yes, and with that, it passes 5-0.
And I will offer the disclaimer that we'll probably be back again soon because this is an area of law that is evolving very, very quickly.
Are there any council liaison reports or communications? Councilmember Marks?
Yeah, this is not a liaison report, but I've been contacted by a number of people who are really interested in beekeeping and keeping bees within the city limits. And I looked it up in our municipal code, 6.28.070 says that bees are prohibited. No person shall keep bees within the corporate limits, except it can be done in a school. And so I would just like to, if the rest of council or a majority would agree, to put this kind of in on the bike rack or the parking lot for later consideration, because the bee population in the world is under attack because of climate change and pesticides and everything else. And I think it would be really wonderful if we could join other cities that allow beekeeping, honeybee keeping within the jurisdiction. So that's it.
Councilmember Stewart?
And if it made sense in a work plan, I'd be happy to support that. I know that I've seen many other cities, probably more recently, making that change in their zoning and their policies. So I think that'd be a really great idea. At the same time, I know we have a lot of big priority items, so I'm happy to stick that in the bike rack as well. And then I just wanted to share with this from the CAP SLO board. We've been talking briefly earlier about the unhoused and homelessness services, and they've been working really hard at the medical assistance treatment center, what we all know as Detox, and just wanted to share that they've been working hard at that, and we're moving forward and having more success. So I really am excited to see what that looks like.
I'll support the bike rack location of bees. And I did want to just add on to what Vice Mayor Stewart said. Lots of people don't realize that the detox center will only be basically for low-income Medi-Cal patients. So it'll be one of the few things that will actually be more available to low-income people as opposed to high-income people. So that will be a great place to start.
Andy, is your hand up or is it just residual from?
No, it's up. And I just wanted to provide I think we already have a majority for the bees and the bike rack, but I'm fine with that. I just wanted to give a brief rail update through SlowCog. We participate in LoSAN, which is the San Luis Obispo all the way down to San Diego, kind of the Southern California train agencies. But there's also the Coast Rail Coordinating Council, and I'm the liaison to that, and that is for Goleta up through Salinas. And at our meeting last month, we had an update on the Coast Rail Corridor Study, which is about extending more service north. So to Salinas and ultimately Gilroy and San Jose. And at that point, you can, either get up to the capital or go up to the Bay Area. And so the study is advancing, and it's pretty exciting to see kind of both a combination, an interim plan that has and a long-term plan that includes buses as well as rail, and trying to have at least a few trains and eventually every hour going north to be able every hour, every 2 hours, depending on the time frame, to be able to get up to the Bay Area and on to Sacramento. So really exciting. And then of course, more rail going south as well. And that also ties in with the LoSAN layover facility that is currently kind of working its way through planning review and EIR. But the reason we'll be able to get the train service north is tied to being able to have the layover service here in the city. So it's opening up some really great possibilities for us in terms of being able to ditch our cars and align with a lot of our other goals. So I just want to let folks know the progress on that.
Great, thank you. Derek, was that just a support wave, or did you have something to say?
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I know this is not the portion of my giving an update, but I did want to share with the council. I did have a chance to touch base with Courtney Kino during the break. You will be getting some correspondence that the president issued to students about behaviors and expectations and some updated information. And then I'll just, in response to Councilmember Stewart's comment earlier during the ESD presentation, we will be focusing on some of that messaging for that 16 to 30 cohort. And so you should be seeing some of that coming out. So thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity to follow up on those two outstanding items.
Sure, of course. Great. Then with that, we will adjourn. The next city council meeting will have a special meeting on Tuesday, April 13th at 5:30 via teleconference. And then our next regular city council meeting is Tuesday, April 20th at 5:30 and 6 p.m. respectively. And with that, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.